Hey guys, welcome to an academy. So this is the editorial analysis of newspapers for today. That is the 25th of January 2017, and it will be presented to you by me, Dipanshu Singh. So before we begin today, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you guys for helping me reach this personal milestone of 1 million video views on my videos on an academy. So thank you so much, guys. I'm deeply indebted to you guys for all your love and support, and thanks for the overwhelming love you guys have shown towards me. So the job is only half done. Right now we have to do a lot of work, and we have to go long mile before we sleep. So these are the lines I actually believe in and which keep me motivated. These are by Robert Frost. So the agenda for today is these editorials. I have clubbed two editorials, one for the TPP and the other on obviously on the Donald Trump. Other one is about the bridging the Gulf, and the other one talks about the loan for tenant farmers and small reforms and big gains. So the practice question for today is regarding what are the external state and non-state actors, and what challenges do they pose for India's internal security. So go on the discuss page over here. Before that, if you cannot find it, you can go to an academy's page and click this bubble, so you can be redirected to this page to answer your questions for today. So these are the other important articles of today which I felt can be really useful for your exam. So you can read this, and this one is really important. Comparison of Subhash Chandra Bose with Jawaharlal Nehru's philosophy. So this is a very interesting article to read. So the first article talks about navigating a Trumpian world. So how his policies will affect India and the global order. So before we begin, guys, I know a lot of you have commented that sometimes I just read the lines from the slides. So that is because I make these content of these videos from my own personal notes. So these are like a summary. These are not exactly copy paste. So the way I do it in this way, because we already have we have a paucity of time, and we have limited time to explain a lot of articles. So that is one reason. Otherwise, I can just give a keyword and go on explaining that whole article, but that won't help you, because it won't help you in getting to know how to make notes. So that is one reason. These are my personal notes, and these are the summaries which I use them for my own personal studies. So in a way, I just try to expand on that issues by picking up these lines. So that is the reason why I sometimes read through the lines. So if you let me know if you have any issues with that. So anyway, the first article is about elevation of Trump, and once he's elected as the president of the United States. How are his policies turning around, and what are his vision about different regions in the world. So elevation of Trump to the position of president is not actually a normal part of the politics. He gained this being an outsider, and he shook the whole establishment of the Washington, and basically focused on the American first policy and America first slogan. And his basic idea was focusing on nationalism, and his speeches were obviously full of emotional drama and emotionally charged speeches. And he claimed that the US has actually benefited foreign industry. That was his main focus, that the globalization has affected and taken away jobs from America. But the sad truth is that that corporate America has never been more richer than before. They have benefited a lot from this globalization, and it is actually the American worker who has suffered at the expense of the corporate America. So these claims are not exactly true, but then obviously the American workers has suffered. So if you look at the US defense budget, it's a comparison of $600 billion. If you combine to that of the next 6 countries in their defense expenditure, that also does not even comes up to $600 billion. So, but why so much of spending on defense? See, one of the basic reasons is that America has always been a global net security provider. He has been the big daddy of the global order, and they have actually overstretched their capacity. They have always engaged themselves in different regions and different conflict areas of the world, be it Middle East, be it South Asia, be it Europe or any other place. And America is also in a serious problem, because not because of the imports from China and cheap imports from China, but also because they have engaged in costly wars. And that is why they do not have the money available to invest in social schemes as much they want to do, because they have a huge defense budget. And Trump expressed that the wealth of the middle class has been eroded and siphoned and ripped off actually and distributed worldwide. But this is actually not true, because it is actually because of automation and increased efficiency of manufacturing sector in America that has led to the decline in the manufacturing jobs. Because if you look at the statistics, their manufacturing output still grew by 86% during the last decade, even though US was continuously losing out on manufacturing jobs. So his foreign policy basically denotes three discontinuities from past. So the first one is that obviously they are reaching out closer to Russia and they want to work with Vladimir Putin, and this they want to create a stable world order. But then obviously there are issues with Iran and other countries and Syrian conflict, and obviously Russia does not have very good relations with Europe, so there can be some issue with that. Then second is obviously relations with China, which are not in a good way right now. They do not give very positive signals because Donald Trump has signaled that he will take China, he will try and counter China and their Chinese imports and impose countervailing duty. And third, surprisingly, US is actually not ready to shoulder a somewhat dysfunctional world order to which it had invested so much over the half of a century. So here US is trying to pull out from the global world order as the global leader, so making way for China to fill in those shoes. So where does India stand actually? So unlike Cold War era, India does not and cannot afford to be a passive observer of the changing global order, because the context of non-alignment has actually changed to maintaining strategic autonomy. That is, they have to look for their strategic interests at the same time maintaining their autonomy and not bounded by other external pressures. So India-US relations had become, has been an outcome of three factors. That is, end of the Cold War, opening of the Indian economy, and emerging of the global and the huge diaspora of Indians in US. So these factors basically led the Prime Minister Vajpayee to call India and USA as natural allies. But then there is obviously issues of increased protectionism under Donald Trump and the H-1B visa issue. And apart from that, USA has also restricted or even interest in maintaining the world order, which would actually lead to scrapping of the Obama's pivot to Asia policy, of which India has been a beneficiary. So this can actually lead to a decline in defense engagement, but that's not a possibility as of now, because whatever the hint has been from Donald Trump's administration, it is positive about increasing defense engagement with India. And there's an issue with cozying up with Russia, because Russia and Iran are siding with Taliban, which is not good signs for China, good signs for India, because Pakistan is trying to create this facade of sorts, that they're trying to engage with Taliban, and they're getting closer with Pakistan is getting closer with China, and already closer with China and Russia, which is a natural and a close ally of India. And the post-Cold War era is therefore full of uncertainty. There is neither an era of a multipolar world or of an individual country, but is in a region, but is jostling between the emergence of regional powers. So the Prime Minister Modi actually needs to act in a pragmatic and a practical manner to draw an imaginative, rather than drawing an imaginative red lines, to make an individual space for India in the age of uncertainty at the global order. The next one is that the Donald Trump has obviously signed the agreement to pull out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So we'll look into the issues with that. So 12 countries that border the Pacific Ocean signed the TPP in February 26 after 8 years of deliberation in Auckland, which represents roughly 40% of the world economic output. So the pact was basically aimed at to deepen economic ties between these nations, slashing tariffs, making a common market, and boosting and fostering growth and trade. But then, obviously, once Donald Trump won elections, there was writing on the wall that he will pull out of TPP, and it was possible for other countries. It may be possible for other countries now to, go for a smaller scale pact in its place, but it can't go ahead in its current form. So the other members of TPP are obviously Japan was the first one to sign and ratify the TPP. The other members are these countries. So which are the goods that would have benefited? So a long range of goods which have benefited from tariffs and would have been removed immediately in some of the cases. So Japanese car makers would have benefited. Then obviously US's economy would have benefited a lot from this. They would have got new market access, which they already want on the WTO. So American farmers and poultry firms also stood to benefit. Then the dairy industry and sugar and wine industry in Australia and New Zealand countries would also have liberalized and gained from this move. But then why pulling out of US is such a big deal? Because US is one of the biggest economy is actually the biggest economy of the TPP, and so for the pact to come into force in its original form, it must be actually ratified before February 2018 by at least 6 countries that make up 85% of the signatories' nation's economic outputs. Since US already has 60% of the combined GDP of the group, so these conditions cannot be met until and unless without US participation. So they have to go in a similar sort of, so other countries are basically planning to go in a similar sort of a smaller scale of TPP since US has pulled out. So why India may gain? Because pacts like this TPP could have potentially eroded eroded the demand for Indian products in traditional markets such as EU and EU. There could have been higher manufacturing and exporting costs for Indian companies. And then India was obviously out of the TPP. If it would have continued, there would have been losses of $50 billion. And India stands to gain from RCEP, which will actually offer its export greater access to several Asian Pacific markets, including China. So these are the common countries between RCEP and TPP. Anyway, US has pulled out. So the next article talks about it's from Livemint, talking about the loan for tenants and small reform big gain. So basically, there's an issue about Indian agriculture that a lot of small tenant farmers do not get credit facilities. So that is why they are at a loss, and a huge number of suicides is actually among them. So more than half of India's labor actually forced still connected directly or indirectly to agriculture for its livelihood, and it gets 1/7 of the national income. The agriculture sector gets 1/7 of the national income. So even though the income share is shrinking rapidly, but the employment share is actually not declining. So there's a dual challenge of increasing the income share, at the same time increasing the rate of employment absorption into the industry and services. So the government has actually promised to double farmers' income in 5 years. So that would require farm output to be raised at almost 10%, which is a huge task. And at the same time, there's a responsibility which has to be shared between the central and the state governments, because a lot of laws related to state come under the state government's purview. But then first, it would require a lot of plugging off a lot of issues. The first is obviously minimizing the subsidies and rationalizing the subsidies, which is a huge burden for the exchequers, and it is being misused. Another example can be the free way how electricity is distributed has led to overinvestment in tube wells and alarming lowering level of water table. And then obviously there are issues with MSP, which does not cover all traditional crops, and it no longer serves as an insurance mechanism. And there is obviously an issue of PDS leakages and farmer suicides. So now, obviously, big gains in poverty reduction are not possible unless there's a multidimensional solution to the problem of agricultural households. So India will have to look for a new and unique development model, which does not decrease the number of households dependence on agriculture, but in fact increases the incomes from it. So the weakest link in this is the agro-processing, and the 70th round of the National Sample Survey says that most number of the households do not get the credit facilities. So why this non-availability of credit? Because the economic activity in agriculture is dependent on upfront investment, for which the returns are only received after 3-4 months. But then there's also an issue of another peculiarity, is that if there's a bumper crop, there's a decline in the prices, which has an adverse impact on the net income of the farming household. And then there are obviously other issues of like weather, pest and monsoon failure. So the major aspect is the phenomena of absentee landlords in tenancy farming, because in most of the Indias, the tenant farmer has no legal status, much like the slum dweller, so therefore they cannot get credit facilities. And in fact, in 2013, if you look at the data, 23,000 crore was given as loan waivers, but minimum amount went to the tenant farmers whose suicide number were the maximum. So a way out of this is implementing a small reform like one in Andhra Pradesh. It is called the Land License Cultivators Act, which empowers the tenants with annual loan eligibility cards. So the name of the tenants is basically written on the land records, but actually that does not give any property rights on the leased land to the tenant, but actually it enables them to avail bank credit and cooperative loan. So some other states are already planning to implement it. So while we wait for this tenancy reforms to gain a legal status, this reform of enabling institutional credit flow to the tenants would actually should be enabled by the central government and be adopted nationwide. The next article is a continuation of the yesterday's article about India's and UAE's relation, reclaiming the Gulf, which we did yesterday. You can go and watch that. So some additional points from the Hindu's article can be added to that bit of news. So what are the agreements and cooperation between India? So India and UAE recently signed the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement. So and apart from that, there will be also several agreements on maritime defense and economic sectors. And then UAE has also endorsed India's concern on terrorism and also hopes to work closely in Afghanistan. So if you look at the trade, currently India and UAE have a $350 billion bilateral trade, which obviously there's a huge scope of improvement in that. So after China and the US, UAE is India's largest trading partner, and then Abu Dhabi's investment authority is also looking for investing in sovereign wealth funds in India in the infrastructure sector. Then obviously there's an issue of the expatriate labor, because a large amount of remittances received is from the Gulf countries, and there is an issue of living standards and working conditions of Indian laborers in UAE and Gulf countries. So the Indian government and therefore launched the e-migrate system for the recruitment and the immigration facilities for these workers. And then the Gulf Cooperation Council is one of India's second largest trading partner and supplies 45% of the Indian petroleum. And some of the major countries are Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Oman. India is hoping that they will participate in India's planned infrastructure that are a part of GCC. And Gulf states are also interested in human resources of India for the development of varied sectors. Obviously, the labor market and labor forces are cheaper in India. And what are the strategic interests? Obviously, Indian Navy regularly visits these Gulf ports and has been a net security provided in these areas and has taken a series of naval exercises in these Gulf states. Obviously, Bab al-Mandeb and Strait of Hormuz are very important for the petroleum and exports and the trade passing through the Suez Canal. So these are very important areas, and obviously Indian Navy visits these places for strategic interest. So there these these areas, and there are a lot of convergence point between the India and UAE for bilateral relations. So this is it for today, guys. I hope you like the video. Till next video, I hope you have a good day. Thank you so much.